I wonder if I could get you to tell me another story,
What?
which is how is it that you ended up moving to Washington with Dad?
Oh, that's easy. If I can remember it. Uh, he he was hired by uh, a temporary organization. They didn't know whether it would be temporary for 5 years or for a month or two, as I'll explain. It was to pass a one payer, a single payer insurance program for health. It was really very forward looking. And it was thought that it was going to be easy to pass because they had all these polls that showed that everybody felt that there should be permanent health insurance. And it was a much, I don't know whether I can pull it all together at the right times and so on, but I gather that polls showed that the American people wanted health insurance. And then they shillied and shallied on it, and they got a bill, and it wasn't comprehensive enough, so it didn't have the health insurance people on their side, and it always had the doctors, the AMA, against it. They just looked at anything like that with implacable hostility, and were able to stop it. And then, but people kept on saying, "Oh, we're going to get this right away," and then Eisenhower got elected, and goodbye, Charlie. Under Truman, that was his greatest enthusiasm, health insurance, and he felt that they were making great progress toward it. But he must have been mistaken because the country went Republican in a big way for Eisenhower, who was, he was not a creep like Trump. He was a decent person, although he he made a speech in which he said something like, "America doesn't want to have socialized medicine, and in which from cradle to grave people are have these benefits given to them for no reason." Uh, and everybody was quick to point out that he had been in the army for years and years and years, and all of his medical expenses were paid, and it was a sort of the cream of socialized medicine for army officers.
Was it Dad's idea that they would move to Washington, and if the Democrats got elected again, that you would stay in Washington and work for various groups one after the other?
No, they had this organization before it was in Washington, it was in New York. And then when the election came, and it was clear that they needed a much bigger effort on this organization against and on getting health insurance, national health insurance, and that it needed to be in Washington.
But did you look forward to moving to Washington?
What?
You had always grown up in New York. Did you look forward to moving to Washington?
We were glad to move from New York. Simply for economic reasons. It was, as today, much more expensive than Washington. Washington was downright cheap. And we got an apartment in Washington, which was uh, you rented either the downstairs apartment or the upstairs apartment. All of these houses had, at one time, a long time ago, they were slave houses, and then some smart real estate person dressed them up a little bit after there was no more slavery, and they kept on getting dressed up and dressed up and dressed up, and but they were nice. They were turned into something very nice, and Washington was much easier to live in than New York.
So, do you, in general, prefer Washington to New York?
Yes, we were able to make friends here more quickly because people moved in and out as elections brought different people in and out, and it was all more transient, so people didn't have already fixed in ice their friends, because their friends were going to be moving to
Yeah.
Montana. So it was easy to fit in. And the people who took these jobs in government or in jobs that depended on government were of a certain level of education pretty high.
Well, Washington does have the highest rate of college-educated residents in it.
I didn't know that.
44% have finished college in Washington.
No kidding. I would think that New York, which, Washington doesn't have any corporate center in Washington.
There are no corporate centers in Washington?
No. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, the people who set the tone in Washington over many years don't necessarily start out as corporate employees. That's what they come when they hit the jackpot. But most of them start out as college-educated people who are not big bosses.
Yes, but Washington has a high number of college-educated people because to have a job in this town, you have to come with a college degree, preferably a master's degree or a PhD.
Is that true?
Yes.
When did I become the director of the of the local ACLU?
Somewhere in the 1980s, early 1980s.
In Washington?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I never did finally graduate, and I never had any trouble.
So I always wondered one thing. At one point in the 1960s, you talked about possibly going to law school.
I didn't talk about it. Natalie talked about it. She really got on my case, and I talked about it in the sense that I kept on saying, I don't want to go to law school.
But how could you have ever gotten in because they require a college degree to get into law school?
That's not true.
It isn't?
No, they make plenty of exceptions. They have people who work in corporate law offices, and they say, we need to hire a lawyer, but you should have this job because you know it, and you don't have a law degree. That can be negotiated. You take some sort of a test, or you go through some process, and you can do it. It's not everybody who can do it and everything, but it was common enough.
Maybe in Abraham Lincoln's day.
Well, I was told lots of times, you should be a lawyer and you can get into law school. And you can get on an accelerated program too. So I just didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be, well, I wanted to be what I almost made, which was the first female director of the ACLU. And I had that within my grasp because R.A. Nye was appointed director of the National ACLU. And it was not the job for him. It's the kind of job, like any big job with a big thing, there's a lot of backslapping in it. And he would not slap anybody's back unless they had 1,000 points toward being the smartest person in the world. And he was a great intellectual snob, and he did not fulfill that role well. And I told him that. I said, what you need is a millionaire and who's going to support you, and you're going to do the intellectual thinking, not going around slapping people on the back, which you don't have a clue about how to do. So he said, well, you're right. And I don't know how it came about because we lost touch over the years, but he got to be the director of the Human Rights Watch, and there wasn't anybody's back to slap except George Soros, which he didn't mind doing.
Yeah.